All right, well, hello everybody. Welcome to the live lesson. I just got us started there with a little jam played in the style of Beast of Burden by the Rolling Stones. So I mention this song in some of my books and videos because of its chord progression and some of the chord shapes that it uses. The actual original song by the Rolling Stones is in the key of E. I was playing something similar, a whole step lower in the key of D. So there's a D major. This would be like the pattern that stems off of the fifth string. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the progression is basically 1, 5, 6, 4, which is an extremely common progression in popular music. And the particular chord voicings I was using an A form for the D, E form, kind of played Hendrix style with the thumb wrapped around the neck here for the A, and then I come up here to B minor, again playing Hendrix style, if you want to think of it that way. And instead of coming down here for G, you can actually play G in C form right here. There's G. And I was just playing this much of it. I left the root out. So I had focusing a lot on strings 2, 3, and 4. I've got my guitar here in split coil mode, and I'm using both pickups, and I'm getting kind of a telly sound there. So I kind of hammer into the D chord from the A like that. See how I flatten my finger out there? A, B minor. And then I did a little bit of a rake where I pull the pick back and do some, and I hammer into that G chord in C form. So it sounds like this. So there's a little lesson for you if you'd like to play in the style of Beast of Burden. And if you want to sound like the actual original recording, you've got to move up a whole step and play in the key of E. So anyway, let's get started here. Remember that you can, if you have a Google account, you can follow the link to the Hangouts on Air page, and then you can post your questions there. You can always post on the Facebook page. I'll be checking that as well. And I already received a handful of questions, so I'll get started on those in a minute. And I'm going to periodically just check my email here to see if I'm getting requests for people to join the Hangout. Because you may have to send a request in order to be able to interact on the actual Hangouts page. All right, I better pull up Facebook as well. So I hope everybody can hear me and everything's fine. If you could just leave a comment or just say something, just let me know that you can hear me and everything's all right. Okay, so we're going to get started. The first question I'm going to talk about, somebody asked me about using, well, let me just give you an overview of some of the questions that I received. Somebody asked me about using the Guitar Pro 6 software program, which is for making tab and notation. Specifically, how did I make my strum up and down arrows? Because I did something a little bit differently than what you typically do in the program. So I'm going to talk about that. The next question is, somebody asked me a question about Spanish-style chord progressions that use E, F, and G together. What scale is that from? What mode is that? How would you play over that? I'm going to talk about that. Somebody asked a question about reading tab, one that I get asked often, and that is, if I'm reading the tab, am I cheating? Should I not do that? Do I need to learn how to read standard musical notation, and should I always read musical notation? I'll talk about that. And then here's another software program question. Somebody asked me a question about how do I make my chord diagrams and what do I recommend for making fretboard and neck diagrams. So those are all of the questions, and I think I'm going to do these out of order. And I think the first thing I'm going to answer is the question, is reading guitar tab cheating? So I actually get this question quite a bit, where someone will email me and they'll say, you know, I'm playing guitar, things are going well, I've got a little band, I can play some songs, I'm pretty happy with my playing, but they say, I don't know how to read music, so am I doing it wrong? And the answer to that question is obviously, well, of course not. I mean, if your goal is to play guitar and you're playing guitar and you're doing it well, then it doesn't matter if you whether you know how to read music or not. You're playing guitar correctly, I guess you could say. But often what they say is, as I'm learning new material, they'll say, I always prefer to look at the numbered tablature as opposed to the standard notation. In some cases, they'll say, I don't even know how to read standard notation. I always just look at the fretboard to figure out where the frets are, and I just put the part together that way. Or sometimes they'll say, I do know a little bit about reading notation. Sometimes I glance at the notation just to get an idea of rhythmically what's happening, but I mostly rely on the tab. Is that wrong? So in this case too, well, of course it's not wrong. I mean, you know, at the end of the day, how you play your guitar is what matters. So if you're playing your guitar well, it doesn't matter, you know, what process you use to get to that point to playing well. Some people read standard notation, some people read tab, some people play by ear, some people prefer to have other people show them. Whatever the process is, you know, really you want to evaluate how well you're doing by the end product, which is your sound. So, you know, when you go to concerts and hear famous rock guitar players play, you're listening to their playing. You're not questioning what process they may have used to learn those parts. In fact, many of the most famous rock and pop guitar players that we all know and love either don't read music at all, or reading music is really doesn't play a big role in it didn't play a big role in their development or how they write and compose and improvise. So there's no rule that says you have to read music. Tablature actually works really well because, you know, when you're dealing with a guitar, any sort of fretted instrument, it's just a big grid, you know. And so tablature systems have been in use for centuries for all sorts of fretted instruments because it makes sense that you would specify note positions using tab lines and fret numbers. In fact, there are actually some limitations in standard notation as far as how guitar players would read it. In notation, you can notate pitches, but you can't notate specifically which string or fret that pitch is to be played on. And on the guitar, there's always more than one option. So, you know, for example, if you're looking at a standard notation, and let's say you see the notes, you know, B, D, F sharp, yeah, you know, what would be a good example? Yeah, let's use B, D, F sharp, B. That's what you saw in standard notation in regular notes. B, D, F sharp, B. Well, you go to the fretboard and you're like, okay, well, B, there's a D, there's an F sharp, there's a B. But let's say they were all stacked together to be played like a chord. Well, you can't play this B and this D together. You can play the D and the F sharp together, and you can't play them all together with this B. So now you have to start rethinking things, and you have to figure out, okay, how can I combine those notes, if at all? How can I do them all together? So B, D, F sharp, B. Well, you could play the B here, so B, D, F sharp, B. So we can get some of those notes, but we still don't have that one in there. So maybe if we come up to here, here's B, D, F sharp, B. There we go. So there are all of them together. Now, if you were looking at tab, you could easily just put, 9, 7, 7, 7 on strings 4, 3, 2, and 1, and you'd instantly be able to recognize, oh, I see, that's a minor chord shape up here, where that's not always so apparent in the notation, and it requires a little work on your part to figure out which position you can best arrange the notes in. Sometimes in standard notation, you'll see little performance notes where they will add other information. So it has to be added somehow. A tab line is really an ideal way to do it for fretted instruments. So tab makes sense for guitar players. Use it. I use it all the time. But let me say this, and hang on, I'm going to just check on a couple things here. See how we're doing. Checking messages. All right, I'm assuming everything's good. All right. And remember, you can be part of the Q&A on the Hangouts page if you want. Okay, let me say this. While tablature certainly is very useful for guitar players and other players of fretted instruments, and while you don't need to learn how to read standard notation necessarily, there's nothing wrong with playing parts without it, there still are many benefits to reading music, and I do encourage everyone to at least learn the basics. As I say in my books all the time, you don't need to learn how to read like a concert violinist or anything like that. Typically, guitar players are not the type of musicians like some piano players or some violin, or orchestral players, where they're always reading off the page, looking at the standard music, standard notation. But there still are important things that you can learn just from learning the very basics of reading music. You can learn about time signatures, you can learn about note values, you can learn about song structure, and if you're which will benefit your playing. So instead of just always playing by ear or always just trying to go by feel, you can develop a better understanding of rhythmically how things are working. And sometimes that actually, sometimes it does improve your sense of timing and your understanding of music, just like learning about scales and chords and progressions can make you a better player, even though you might be playing that stuff anyway, just not really understanding it. Likewise, as you learn about note values and time signatures and some other aspects of written music, even though you might intuitively be doing some of those things anyway as you play, but not realizing it, as you study it and you learn more about it, it can actually improve your playing. And it can also help you develop skills that maybe are not coming to you so naturally. There might be certain types of rhythms, certain time signatures that you're not just picking up on naturally, and when you study it and you break it down and you learn how to count it, it can make sense, and all of a sudden your hands start doing things that you didn't think were possible before. So, and then in addition to that, in a lot of playing situations, especially the more kind of professional they might be, you're likely to get some sort of chart put in front of you. It will likely not be complete standard notation. It'll probably be something like a rhythm chart, where they just kind of give you the key signature and they give you the basic chords, and they'll give you any essential rhythms that you might need, like an essential strum pattern rhythm, or if there's a break that the band takes, and you basically kind of follow the chord changes. It'll say whatever, C, F, G, and measure by measure, and you kind of comp your own rhythm. That means you kind of make up your own rhythm, but you're expected to be able to at least follow the measures and follow the chord changes, and then if there is something that needs to be played, a specific rhythm, or in some cases maybe a specific melody, it could be put in standard notation, and you're expected to be able to sight read it, or at least know enough about sight reading that in your prep time before this gig, you could just quickly work it out. And if need be, perhaps tab it out for yourself on a separate sheet for your reference. So there are lots of good benefits to learning. Again, just the basics of sight reading. You don't have to become any expert. I always tell people just get a beginner level sight reading book like Mel Bay's Modern Guitar Method Grade 1, or Hal Leonard has one, or something similar, and just work your way through. I usually recommend that people get to the point where they can read and play 16th notes. That's kind of a good goal, and that's still kind of considered beginner level. So if you have any other questions about that, send them my way. I'm going to move on to our next question, and it is regarding the use of the Guitar Pro notation and tablature software. So perfect. Let me get some things set up here, and I'm going to just share my screen with you. Oh, I got to open Guitar Pro, sorry. It's going to play a little music for us as it opens. And let me share my screen so you can see what's going on here. And we will share the desktop. Okay. There's Guitar Pro. Is that working? I'm not sure if that's working, is it? Let's do this. Oh, I didn't do that, sorry. Okay, and it goes on forever. All right, so back to, here's Guitar Pro. So this is a program for creating standard musical notation and tablature, and even just kind of slash chord rhythms. I use this for my books and stuff when you're looking at the figure examples here. Let me put the standard notation in there. So there you go. You can do all this. And obviously this would be perfect if you need to create some professional looking tab or music, but it has many other uses as well. It's great for learning how to compose. You can plug in note information here, and you can play things back. There's some options to upgrade the sounds, and you can get some high quality sounds. So people use it as a tool for composing. It's great for practicing as well. You can create tracks in here, put in some chord changes and adjust the tempo and use it with practice. So there's lots of good uses, and I won't get into all those right now. The main question that someone asked was, how do you make up and down arrows if you want to make a strum pattern? And let me simplify this just to make it a little easier. I'm going to take the standard notation away. So we're looking at, this would be, by the way, I talked about like a rhythm chart. This is what like a rhythm chart would look like sometimes. They just give you kind of some basic key signature, a tempo, you're expected to be able to count measures and maybe a basic rhythm, and this is what it sounds like. And you might have a whole song this way, and you're expected to be able to follow the form of the song and follow the chord changes and either play the rhythm as written, or sometimes it's just kind of a suggestion, like, you can copy your own rhythm based somewhat on a similar pattern. Anyway, so as for putting in up and down arrows to indicate a strum pattern, which is what somebody asked, first of all, you're going to need to go to track properties. You're going to need to make sure that the tablature is visible because they will be put in the tab. So if you come over here to this kind of editor toolbar, you can see these arrows right here. This is a brush downstroke and a brush upstroke. So you select, you know, where you want to put your arrow. So we'll start here. So this pattern, which is a very simple pattern, would be played down, down, up, down, down, up. I suppose you could do it all with downstrokes, but let's say you're going to do down, down, up. So just, this is the downstroke, so I'll put a downstroke in there. Okay. Now, you might, let me just get that out of the way. Okay, we're looking at this. You might notice something a little odd. If this is a downstroke, why is it pointing up? Well, because when you look at a tab line, you're looking at it upside down. So when you strum down on your guitar, you're actually strumming from string 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So that is moving across the strings in the right direction for a downstroke. And you might put a downstroke here on the next beat. And then this would be an upstroke. I'll put an upstroke there. So down, down, up. Again, a little confusing because this looks like a downstroke, but you know, in the tab, you're strumming strings 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So again, you're looking at the strings upside down here. It's kind of a bird's eye view. You know, you're holding the guitar and looking down over it. So that's how you use the brush strokes in Guitar Pro. However, like in my book, Rhythm and Technique for Dummies, where I teach strum patterns and the strumming technique, I didn't use these brush strokes because I thought it was a little too confusing. So what I did instead, well, first of all, take the tab out of there. I just experimenting, just found my own alternative way to do this. And in the program, you can select a note and you can come here to text, and then you can write something above the note if you wanted to, right? You could write hi or whatever, whatever you want to put above there. So I thought, could I put a symbol in there? So I just went to the web and I just searched, let's see, text arrow, and I found some symbols. I thought, all right, here's a downstroke. So let me copy one of those. I'm going to copy. You know what? Did you see that? Yes, you saw that because I'm not just sharing Guitar Pro, I'm sharing everything, right? All right, so then I'll come back here and I'm going to select text and I'm going to just paste that arrow in there. See, I like that better. And I could put one here as well. Text, I actually got a keyboard shortcut and just do T, so there we go. Right? So then I got smart. I have this program right here, it's called Text Expander, where you can assign a keyboard shortcut code to paste something. So I programmed it to, I copied a down arrow and I copied an up arrow right here into my text expander program, which I'm not going to get into right now, so that whenever I do the letters UUA, it replaces it with an up arrow, and if I do the letters UUD, whoops, I'm sorry, DDA, with a down arrow. Okay, so then I went back to my Guitar Pro, and so I can just do this, T for text, DDA, whoops. There we go. I have to put a little space in it. Oh, and I don't like that space. So what do I do? Now I have to delete it. There we go, that's better. So text. And, well, I didn't want that there. I'm not paying attention to what I'm doing, sorry. That should be up. That should be down. And so on. And this is actually how I made the strum patterns. tedious, I know, but I like the way that that looks better. So when I'm just notating an example and I just want to give people a basic strum pattern, I like having the arrows there. I think that looks better. It's less confusing. And in most of my examples, I wouldn't include any standard notation or tablature. I would just use what's called slash notation like this, and we work on strum patterns with kind of basic chords. The only time I think I included tablature was when it was critical to know in what position you were supposed to play these particular chord shapes. Then I included tablature, but I did not put any brush strokes in the tablature. Readers would look up here and just follow these arrows for strum patterns. So yeah, it's kind of a tedious process, but that's how it works, and it worked well. You know, it looks good in the book and it's easy to follow, and that's how you do it. All right. Let me get back to our Hangouts here. There we go. Hello. Again, if you have any questions, you can send them. I'm checking my email here too as we're going, just in case somebody's emailing. All right, looks like we're good. Okay, let's keep going. Next, and I'm going to use my acoustic guitar for this one. Somebody asked about playing Spanish-style chord progressions that use an E major chord, F major, and G major. So here we have 3 major chords, 2 a half step apart, and then 2 a whole step apart. So, you know, you might hear something like, you know, and then you often hear something like, you know, let's see. So the question is, how does that fit into a key? What scale or what mode is that? Well, the first part of the answer is it does not fit into any major scale. You're not going to be able to fit those 3 major chords into any one major scale. So there's something else happening here. So let me break this down, and I'm going to show this to you in steps, because there's actually there's several things going on here, and I will get you to it. So track with me. First thing we're going to do is we are going to play in the key of C, the C major scale. And you know that you can actually center your music on any degree in the major scale, and you produce a different mode or different sound, and you have a different chord that's functioning as your primary chord. So I'm going to go to the 3rd chord in the C major scale. It's E minor right here. I could do it like this as well. 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to center on the 3rd degree E minor. That would make E Phrygian mode. So I would use the notes and chords from the C major scale, but I'm centering on the 3rd degree E and its chord E minor. And when your ear hears that as the starting point, produces E Phrygian mode sound. So that's E Phrygian mode. All right, now let's just set that aside and let's talk about another type of mode. Still in the C major scale, I could play off of the 6th degree A and the 6th chord A minor, and this would make A Aeolian mode, which is also known as the natural minor, or sometimes it's called the relative minor. So playing notes and chords from the C major scale, but centering on the 6th degree, makes A natural minor. Okay, take that. Let's set it aside. Let's talk about something new. Still in the key of C. When you add a seventh, you know, each chord can be played as a triad. Root third, fifth, and you could go through the scale and you could add a seventh as well. I teach that in Fretboard Theory. When you get into adding chord tones and extensions to chords, that's when you get into things like C major 7, D minor 7, and so on. E minor 7, F major 7. When you get to the fifth degree in a major scale, something interesting happens. You have a major chord with a major triad, but when you add a seventh, it has a minor or flat seventh in it. And that creates what's called a dominant seventh, which in music can simply be referred to as seventh. In this case, G7. Those are all different types of G7. And that fifth degree, which is called the dominant, by the way, the fifth degree in a major scale is called the dominant. I teach that in Fretboard Theory Volume 2. It has a natural push to the tonic. So G7 naturally pushes to and resolves on C. I've got a whole chapter and video course on dominant function. This is just the very, very beginning of it. It's really important to understand dominant function in music and all the different things you can do with it. So composers will usually take this dominant tonic relationship and apply it to other types of chords. So in other words, they'll play dominant chords where they wouldn't naturally occur in the scale because they like how their sound would push to another chord. So G and C have a what's called like a tonic and dominant relationship. C is 1, G is 5. So a 5 dominant will push to a 1 chord, and so you'll often see what's called secondary dominance, where composers will create that type of movement in other areas within the scale, even when you don't have a dominant chord. So that's all covered in Fretboard Theory Volume 2. And you can use a dominant chord even to kind of push and resolve to a minor chord, and that's what I'm getting at here. In the key of A natural minor, which we just talked about a minute ago, its dominant chord, in other words, the chord that is a fifth away from it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is E. And if you play the chord as it occurs in the scale, you'd play E minor. But a lot of composers would play E major, or more specifically E dominant seventh instead, because they like the way that dominant pushes to the minor tonic, the minor tonic, in this case A minor. So A minor and E7 can have a tonic dominant relationship. So let's take a look at what's changed with that E minor. So E minor normally has a G natural in it. You could play E minor 7, which has a D in it. That's still straight out of the scale. But to play E major or E dominant 7th, you have to raise that G to G sharp. That's the major third of the E chord. And when you're in the key of A minor and you raise G natural to G sharp, you create what's known as the A harmonic minor scale. That G sharp ends up being the 7th degree of A. You're raising it 7th up a half step. So a lot of times people teach the harmonic minor scale and say it's a natural minor scale with the 7th degree raised, which is true. Although the reason why it's raised is not always explained. I gave you a little bit of the explanation here, and of course I teach it in more detail in the book and online. So the A harmonic minor scale would raise G to G sharp because that changes E minor to E major or E dominant 7th, which gives you that nice dominant sound and that dominant push to A minor. and it's very common. It's almost just as common in music to have harmonic minor as it is to have natural minor. So whenever you're playing in a minor key, it's very common, dominant 5 chord with a major third in it. All of this to say, so we started with Phrygian mode, then we talked about the natural minor, then I talked a little bit about dominant function so that I could explain why we would play harmonic minor. So now what we're going to do is we are going to play a mode of the harmonic minor scale. We're going to take the A harmonic minor scale with that G sharp in it, and we're going to center our playing on the 5th degree E, which remember now is major. And you now if you go to the F chord, you have the notes in the A harmonic minor scale to build an F major chord and a G major chord. So there's where those 3 major chords, E, F, and G, these being a half step apart, these a whole step apart, that's the scale they come from. You cannot build those chords from any type of major scale or any one of its modes. It has to be built from harmonic minor. And that means that if you're playing over this type of progression, you want to use notes from the A harmonic minor scale, which is the same as the A natural minor, which is the same as the C major scale, but the G is raised to G sharp. Don't play any G naturals, play them all as G sharp. If you start on E, because we're playing like a mode of the harmonic minor starting in the 5th degree E, you'd have E, F, G sharp, A, B, C, D, E, and so on. And it's very common in kind of Spanish flavored music. The name of this particular mode is, there isn't like one official agreed upon name for this mode, but I mentioned several in the book. But one that is maybe most common is Phrygian Dominant. Phrygian because you're viewing it as being the 3rd mode of C major, right? E Phrygian mode, and then dominant because instead of playing E minor, you're making it like a dominant 7th chord. You can make it a plain major as well. So the name Phrygian Dominant is often used, so you can call it that. And this is just one key, but this would work in any, you could play in other Phrygian Dominant keys, of course. And one song example I might give you is the very beginning of Space Oddity by David Bowie. It starts out like this. So you just take an E major chord shape and you just move these fingers up a half step. Don't change the open strings. So it's like you've gone to F, but you're not barring, and it's kind of an odd sound. There's a lot of tension there, and then you go back to the E. But that's got that Phrygian Dominant sound. In fact, you could even do the same thing with G. And you can play a little bit of Space Oddity as well. Doesn't last long at the beginning of that David Bowie song, but it is there initially. So that answers that question thoroughly, I think. If you have any other questions about it, send them my way. And let me check in, see what's happening here. Okay, looks like we're good. Okay, let me put this guitar down for a minute. I'm going to share my screen with you again because the other question is, what do I use to make my neck diagrams? So why not talk about that since we already talked about what I use for tabs. So let me pull my program up here and I'll share screen with you so you can see. So here we go. Okay, so this is called NeckDiagrams. And you can just Google it. It's just a software program you can purchase and download. And I'm not sure if there's really many competitors to it. And it's fantastic. In my first book, Fretboard Theory, I actually created all of my own diagrams using Adobe InDesign and Illustrator. This does that better, quicker, and easier. So this is what I use from now. And what you do is I'll start a new diagram here, and you can choose from some of these templates. Let's do something like whatever, this. So there you go. So you got some neck diagrams there, and I'll just show you what you do. It's pretty simple. I mean, you just click on things. So here's your note marker. So let's say you're going to write out some chords and whatever. The key is C. So here's a C chord. Here's an F chord. Here's a G chord, right? Just like that. And you just go in here. And then maybe you want to indicate which strings you don't strum, so you can mark them with an X. Maybe you want to indicate which ones are open, so you can mark them. If you want to indicate a fingering, select this. Whoops, I'll come over here and I'm going to label these as a fingering. And now I can just click on each individual one and I can do on the keyboard. I'm just hitting numbers on the keyboard here. See, pretty simple. How do I want to do this? One, maybe like this. Right? And if you want to indicate a bar, I just selected this so you can indicate a bar. And it's all good, right? You can actually select different colors and stuff like that. I usually make them black and white because most of my books are printed black and white in the interior. Costs a lot more to do color, people. And maybe you might want to do, horizontal neck diagrams. If you wanted to put, a scale pattern or something, let's say, G major scale. So, you might go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like that. There you go. That's the G major scale. And then you could put fingerings here. You could maybe you don't want to use fingerings. Maybe you want to use notes. So there's the notes. Maybe you want to use intervals. Let's say we want to indicate the interval. So I'm going to notice that it didn't put any numbers in there because it can't tell you what the interval is unless you tell it which one is the root. So I'm going to select this one and say that's the root. There we go. So there's the intervals. Isn't that cool? And if I moved one of these, it would automatically adjust the interval. See, now it says flat 7, right? Major third. Because it knows that this is the root pitch, so it's going to measure everything from there. And it even has some features where you can automatically fill in the whole fretboard. So let me go to, I'm going to right click on this one here, go to scale generator, major scale family, Ionian mode, that's plain major scale, G major scale, good. And I wanted to just put all the notes of G major scale between frets 1 and 24, and I'm going to click here, allow for open strings as well, and watch this. Bam! There's all the notes of the G major scale. On the fretboard, now it's only showing up to 12, but I could come up here and select it, and if I wanted to show all 24 frets, it will. A little crammed, but there it is. I can select how many frets I want the diagram to show. Let me come down here. Let's say I wanted to show 15. There's 15. And I can show at which fret I want the diagram to start. So maybe I want it to start at fret 3. And of course it automatically labels the fret numbers here. So that's basically how it works. I think this program is fantastic. I mean, it is absolutely worth the price. Well, for me, because I'm constantly making diagrams all day. So I don't know how much use this would have for someone that's not teaching like me, but it's still helpful. And it's not very expensive. So if in your own guitar studies you would like to make diagrams, just just for your own studies, or just for, I don't know what you might use it for, to remember parts or chords, or as you're composing or whatever, or maybe you're teaching and giving lessons, teaching your kids or friends or something like that. Very, very useful. Here's all my files. These are all the files from everything after Fretboard Theory 1. This is Fretboard Theory 2. This is all the For Dummies books. Anything that I used a neck diagram on. Here are all the figures. Isn't that cool? Okay, let's get out of here. So that's the NeckDiagrams program. Just Google it, NeckDiagrams, and you'll find it online. And I think it's fantastic. And you know what? That actually wraps up our questions today. So I'm going to wrap things up. I'll check just to make sure I'm not missing any questions. Looks like we are good. So you know what? I started this with a little bit of that track playing in the style of Beast of Burden, and I'm going to go out that way too. So let me just do a quick sound check here. All right. Hey, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. As always, if you have any questions, send them to me, and I will help. Oh, one thing I forgot to do. Sorry. Everyone's going to ask. What are you playing through today? Okay, so that's what I'm playing through today, which I think is probably the same as what I used in previous weeks. So this is just volume pedal. I'm actually not even, oh yeah, I was using this. So volume pedal, I got the compressor on. I think it sounds good with single coils through the little amp I'm using, which I'll show you in a second. Little note about compressors. They work better on tube amps when you have the tube amp to the point of breakup, on the edge of breakup. Then they can just add a nice sweetness and compression. When you're not playing through a tube amp, or you're not at that point of breakup, it doesn't always have a pleasant sound, and sometimes you plug it into your amp and you're like, I don't get it. Why do people use these? So try it on the edge of breakup. Delay, I don't think I actually had my delay on. This is actually just a snapshot, and I wasn't using anything from the M5. So you're basically hearing my amp and some compression, and then I used the left side of this dual overdrive pedal here from Visual Sound. They're now called True Tone. You can get the same pedal, the True Tone VSXO. I'm using this left side for the lead when I did the guitar solo. All right. And I'm playing the PRS DGT. I've got it in single coil mode. All right. Actually, I had it in the middle, so it's kind of telly-like sounds. And I'm playing through that little Fender Pro Junior right there, little 15-watt amp, and I'm not using the speaker. Instead, I'm coming into this isolation cabinet that's got a Celestion Vintage 30 in it, SM57 mic'd up to the mixer. That's it. I'm going to play my track here and play you out, and I will see you guys next time. By the way, these chords here are G, B/F sharp, A. I also didn't mention what scale I use over this. D major pentatonic, chord, it's back to the 1 chord, 4 chord, 1 chord, 5 chord. You can even do this little trick. And then D major pentatonic. Other things as well. When I get to that G chord, sometimes I will play part of the C form arpeggio. So, whoops, I can do that better. So I'm going through some different pentatonic positions. Here's D major pentatonic in pattern 4. There's my D chord in C form. Maybe a little major scale. could stay in this like lead pattern that I teach in Fretboard Theory Volume 2, where you basically play a little bit of, and a little bit of. Whoops. Hey, that's all I wrote, folks. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.